All right, we're in this.
Yes.
Greetings, and welcome to Ill Repute, a podcast about women and women first. I am Sovereign Syre, a comedian, a writer, and generally unhinged. Maybe some days I'm a marine gynecologist.
And I'm Ella Darling, an ex-librarian, a VR pioneer, and the proud owner of several horror-themed dildos. And that's the truth, baby.
And I love it. Now, we here at Ill Repute support women's rights.
But more importantly, we support women's wrongs.
And that's what we're talking about today. I should have named this episode Women Wrong. We're talking about borderline personality disorder. The diagnosis that says, hey, cheer up. We know exactly what's wrong with you and you're never going to get better. So why are we talking about BPD on Ill Repute? Because BPD is one of the most stigmatized diagnoses out there. And troublingly enough, the majority of those who are given that label are women. And that's what we do here at Ill Repute. We destigmatize, we decolonize, and, discuss our own sexual peccadillos. It's a buffet. Take what you want.
We contain multitudes.
Exactly.
Now for the disclaimer. I do have a degree in forensic psychology, and Savi is batshit crazy. So while we do have a pinch of background experience when it comes to this kind of thing, neither of us are trained mental health clinicians, diagnosticians, or therapists. So this episode is not about trying to figure out if you have BPD. And while we will touch on some common treatment modalities, that is not an endorsement of any specific treatment.
The point of this episode is to talk about why so many women are diagnosed with BPD, not with diagnosing or treating it. If at any point, however, in this episode, if you feel triggered or you feel like maybe you're someone that might need some help after listening to this, we have included several links and resources for you to get in touch with someone that can help you get some help in the show notes. So yeah. So if you're listening along and you hear something that makes you feel like, oh, this feels very similar and maybe I might want some assistance, we got you. So, but overall, that is not the point of this podcast. We're not here to diagnose or treat or tell you how to treat anything.
I wouldn't take my advice if I were you anyway.
I often take my advice and it's gotten me here. So,
well, I take your advice all the time. If you're going to take someone's advice, I do recommend Sovereign's. She is insightful. She's full of wisdom. She rolls 20 on all of her wisdom checks. Smart as just one of the smartest gals I know. One of the smartest human beings I've ever met.
I do want to say that I have special feelings around borderline because there's at least one person in my life that I am convinced suffered from this and kind of destroyed my life. And secondly, I have a very strong belief that my mother had this and that she kind of aged out of it. And I think part of what makes me kind of good at giving advice is living with someone suffering with this illness and observing someone going through that kind of suffering and also dealing with the ways that suffering can impact others around that person. So yeah, people used to be like, you're like a therapist. And I would be like 14. And I was like, I am unofficially the therapist of one Jacqueline, aka Miss Jack out on the streets. That would be my mother.
Oh, your mom.
She'll appreciate the shout out.
She was Nurse Jackie.
Yeah, she was. She seriously was.
A quick brief history about the origin of BPD. In 1938, Adolf Stern, a psychoanalyst, coined the term borderline to describe individuals who seem to be on the borderline between neurosis and psychosis.
BPD was officially included in the DSM-3 in 1980, with subsequent editions refining and expanding the diagnostic criteria. I wrote a whole treatise, but I'll start with this video of Dr. Daniel G. Amon beautifully summarizing what BPD is. So let's look at that right now.
Let's talk about borderline personality disorder. It's a very common diagnosis for people who don't get better. And I hate the diagnosis. Why? It shames people. It basically says, you're not going to get better. It's not my fault. It goes with intense feelings of loneliness, abandonment, temper problems. They'll idealize somebody one day and then devalue them the next. And what I often see on brain scans is they have low frontal lobe activity, so they're very impulsive. They have very high anterior cingulate gyrus activity. They get stuck on you're great or you're awful, and their emotional brain is also too hard. I find they often do well with a mood stabilizer, something to calm down this overactivity, often something to boost serotonin in their brain, and then EMDR for the past trauma they have. They also do often really well with DBT, dialectic behavior therapy. They learn how to regulate their emotions that can be out of control. But let's see it as a brain problem rather than a personality problem.
Borderline personality disorder is a mental health condition characterized by pervasive and enduring patterns of instability in mood, self-image, interpersonal relationships, and impulse control. People with BPD often experience intense emotional fluctuations, making it challenging for them to maintain stable relationships and regulate their behavior and emotions. So we've got another TikTok to check out here.
So I have borderline personality disorder. And if you don't know what that is, I'm going to consider you one of the lucky ones because it's not fun. Every relationship I have, whether it's a friendship, a romantic relationship, whatever, is severely impacted by this. And by far, one of the most common things I get told is that I don't look like I have a personality disorder. I'm not sure what that's supposed to look like, but it's very difficult for me to regulate my emotions the way that a neurotypical person would. I get overwhelmed very easily. I feel every emotion to an extreme. So if I'm happy, I am on top of the world. But if I'm sad, I'm down really bad. It's very hard for me to form attachments to people. So when I do, it's very intense. If you also have BPD, you're not alone.
Yeah. I like that you're pulling firsthand experiences from women who actually live with BPD.
It was really important to me to make sure that throughout this episode that we got just genuine people explaining this disorder because it's so stigmatized, and the amount of pain these people are going through, sometimes you can really only understand when you hear it from them. Mm-hmm, and so just like a trigger warning, there's going to be a few clips that might be triggering for people. They were triggering for me. I mean, but I feel like it's very important that we help destigmatize this illness, and why that is will be evident through the rest of the episode. So individuals with BPD often experience rapid and intense shifts in their mood, from extreme happiness to deep sadness, anger, or irritability. These mood swings can be triggered by external events or may occur without any apparent cause. People with BPD often struggle with an unstable self-identity, leading to feelings of emptiness and an uncertain sense of who they are. They may frequently change their goals, values, and self-concept.
Impulsivity is a common trait in individuals with BPD. They may engage in risky behaviors such as reckless driving, substance abuse, binge eating, or self-harm without considering the consequences. Those with BPD typically have an intense fear of abandonment or rejection, leading to a preoccupation with relationships. They may go to great lengths to avoid being alone, even in unhealthy or harmful relationships.
Relatable.
I was going to say the same thing, but I don't want to say that and like negate or dismiss or, smooth over the lived experiences of people,
with it. Yeah. But like, this is a good point to say that all of us have some borderline traits. All of us have some narcissistic traits. All of us have antisocial traits. All of us have codependent traits. The diagnosis requires that these issues are so pervasive over such a long period of time that they cause a real disruption in daily life and create enough stress, confusion, despair that they can't function normally. And so they need an intervention. And that's the difference. Everyone's calling everyone a narcissist these days, but like all of us have from time to time engaged in selfish behavior. That doesn't mean we're narcissists. We don't want to confuse temporary things with like the diagnosis, but we can look at the ways that we do sometimes engage in these behaviors and then imagine them times 20.
Absolutely.
Right. So it is a pathway to empathy.
The thing to keep in mind is that, while everybody feels feelings that are associated with disorders, the reason why we have the diagnosis is because this person is experiencing that to a degree that it is interfering with their life and the way that they function either socially or in work or in any part of their life. It is pervasive enough to cause dysfunction. That's one of the things that, everybody's sad sometimes. You're not depressed. It wouldn't be a diagnosis if it was the same sad that everybody feels all the time. It wouldn't be like, if that's just what it was, we wouldn't call it something. So anyway, slight aside.
Here is a clip of someone with BPD talking about how they operate in relationships.
One thing about borderline personality disorder, I could see you on Monday, I could see you on Tuesday, date night on Wednesday, bae night on Thursday, Netflix and chill on Friday, and if you don't text me on Saturday, good morning, goddess queen, best thing that's ever happened to me in my life, you hate me. You fucking hate me, and I know it, and I know you hate me. And you know what? You're probably with another bitch.
Also relatable.
Yes, very, very relatable. Oh my God.
But I think we would call that catastrophizing.
Yes.
And yeah, that's when your brain automatically goes to like the worst possible outcome of a situation. And so I think it's kind of obvious to see how this would interfere with interpersonal relationships.
Yes.
Because that's a lot. That's a lot. So maintaining stable and healthy relationships is a significant challenge for individuals with BPD. Their interpersonal relationships may be characterized by extreme ideation and devaluation of others, leading to a lot of conflict and a lot of turbulence. Here's someone else talking about the concept of a favorite person. So another common feature of this diagnosis is something that's colloquially called favorite person, which is when a specific person in someone's life that has BPD becomes sort of the axis around which their entire life is organized. And that in itself can be very difficult for people to deal with. So here's a clip of someone with BPD talking about the favorite person phenomenon.
Oh, so I'm your favorite person, so I'm just like your best friend. No. So what does having a favorite person mean? Oh boy. You are essentially the person I feel safest with. That means I come to you for any kind of news, good or bad. But that also means my emotions literally revolve around your demeanor and how you're feeling that day. And I didn't even consciously do this. I didn't choose one day, hey, Brad's my favorite person. It just happened. So like, what do you mean that your moods and emotions are based off of me, basically? Because of the attachment I have formed with you and because you make me feel safe. You are the one person I know that can bring me back to a stable mood. But you're also the person that I fear of losing. So I will literally be overanalyzing your demeanor, how you treat me, how you're responding to other people, to dictate in my head if you're gonna leave me or not. But I'm not gonna leave you, so why do you do that? Because the moment you're not around me, I convince myself you don't love me anymore. It's called fear of abandonment.
That is kind of one of the best and most concise descriptions of what fear of abandonment actually feels like.
Yeah. That was a very, very good presentation or representation of that.
Yeah. Just so people know, these clips are taken from TikTok and in the show notes. So when you go click the episode on your podcast app and it's that drop down that's the episode summary, those are the show notes. In addition to all the links that will be there, will be links to all these TikToks. So you can go follow and support those creators on TikTok because they're making themselves incredibly vulnerable in an attempt to destigmatize this illness. And we absolutely want to support them and give them a platform for that. So that's just an aside.
Commendable.
So some people with BPD may experience episodes of dissociation where they feel disconnected from themselves or reality. It can be a coping mechanism to deal with overwhelming emotions. As a psychology person, Do you want to explain kind of what dissociation is? Because like I realized that I dissociate quite a bit. I had a very abusive childhood, so like that's par for the course with PTSD. But there were things I didn't recognize were dissociating, because I thought dissociation meant like a schizotypal break. Like I don't have any bones. I came to realize that sort of like endlessly scrolling or just listening to a song over and over, like that what dissociation is. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
It's basically a sense of disconnection from like yourself and your experience, your lived experience. So it can be a trauma response where you dissociate. So it's you're sort of removing yourself from the experience. So instead of feeling like it's happening to you, it's something that you acknowledge is happening, but you don't personalize it because you've disassociated yourself from it. You've disconnected yourself from it. And it can be something like that. It could also just be, you know, a way to cope with a lot of overwhelming feelings or a lot of external stressors or internal stressors, just something that sort of like removes you from being present. Makes sense?
Yeah, like, because I feel that, you know, and we'll get into this later, but there is a lot of overlap between things like ADHD, autism, antisocial, Asperger's. They're all kind of in the same wheelhouse. OCD, histrionic personality disorder, NPD, antisocial personality disorder, which I already talked about. But it's important to understand that like this is kind of in a cluster of illnesses that all kind of share some similar traits. They absolutely have to do with like positionality, such as I'm the greatest in the world. I'm the most horrible in the world. I can control everything. I'm in control of nothing. Like those are all positionality issues. And I think that that's kind of at the crux of a lot of things like BPD. So when they're talking about not having a stable sense of self, I think that's kind of what they're getting at, is a person that is constantly like, who am I? What's my position in the whole situation? Right.
But also,
and can
I
I
think
change that?
Thinking in superlatives is a big thing that I pulled from what you just said. There's no great, it's the very best or the very worst. There's no room for intermediary sort of like rational understanding.
Yeah. And if you've ever had someone split on you, which I have, it's really alienating and discombobulating. The intensity of the emotions over perceived slights, or you didn't text me back because you're a piece of shit. You're just taking advantage. Every time that like I'm there for you, it's great. And then like you didn't text me back, and that's because you're taking advantage of me and my kindness. It'll immediately go to a place that's like so extreme, you know, and then you're sitting there going like, oh fuck, did I forget to text back? Cause like I didn't mean to. Like it genuinely was just, I didn't realize that much was on the table. And so it can create a cycle in relationships where you constantly feel like you're trying to win someone back because they've decided you're the worst person in the world. I had made a TikTok where I was talking about it, and then I thought it was too personal, but I figured I could talk about it here. When you're a child around someone with BPD and they do have these emotional explosions and these like hair trigger kind of responses to things, it definitely instills in you, I despise huge displays of emotion because I know how they made me feel as a kid. This is too much. Like, this is not fair. Like, and I don't want people to ever feel like how I felt when I was a little kid. And it also taught me that like what really happened is not what's important. What is important is how it made someone feel. And I understand that can be great impact versus intention, et cetera, but what it taught me as a kid is that I couldn't trust my own perceptions of reality because they would get twisted by the authority figure. It's a real illness. I really want to destigmatize it so we can talk about it, because like there is treatment available, and part of the stigmatization comes from this idea that you can't fix it.
In some cases, individuals with BPD may experience transient psychotic symptoms such as paranoid thoughts or brief delusional beliefs. Self-harm, including cutting or burning, can be a way for individuals with BPD to cope with emotional pain or regulate their emotions. And obviously, those are not symptoms exclusive to BPD, but people with BPD are at a higher risk of that and of suicidal thoughts and behaviors, making early intervention and treatment crucial. Now, when I say people with BPD are at a higher risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors, it's by a lot. It's significant.
It is. It's significant. So I've included this TikTok, and this is a creator that recorded her having a BPD break.
Can you give us a sense of what is a BPD break?
So she was having a conversation with someone she cared about, and they responded with K. And that immediately triggered her into like, they don't care about me. They don't,
So
whatever.
that's the break.
So that's the break. But she's able to articulate within the break the amount of frustration she feels that she suffers from this illness. This was triggering for me.
If you want to skip past this, it's about 1 minute of audio.
Yeah.
So just jump forward that much.
I fucking cannot fucking stand having a fucking favorite person. Oh my god. I'm fucking doing this because he fucking said K. Because he fucking said K. Okay, like that's it. That's fucking it. He's fucking mad at me. And he fucking said K. And now I'm having the biggest fucking mental breakdown. Like, I don't want to fucking do this. I don't want my emotions to be so fucking dependent on how somebody fucking treats me. It's not okay. I fucking hate having BPD. Like, it's literally so fucking exhausting. Like, okay, it shouldn't matter if he's mad at me. It shouldn't matter if he said gay. But I'm having the biggest fucking breakdown because of how dependent I am on my stupid fucking favorite person.
She's
That's
really
really
brave.
rough.
She's
Yeah.
really brave for doing that.
Yeah.
That got me in my feelings, because I think a lot of us as women have been there. And we're going to get into disproportionately, by a large margin, is a female illness. And my personal belief is that a lot of this is the fallout of patriarchy, that we're kind of put in a position to be completely dependent on people that don't give a fuck about us and don't even view us as human. That this is the fallout from that. But that was like hard for me to watch because I've been there. I hate that my emotional well-being is so wound up in how someone else feels about me. You know, and a certain degree of that is good. Like, shame in a certain amount is necessary, right? So that we don't rape and kill people, so we don't steal shit. A certain amount of shame is important and productive, especially in a society of interdependence. But this is like shame on steroids. BPD is one of the most commonly misdiagnosed mental health conditions. It's so misdiagnosed, in fact, that there isn't even an accurate prevalence rate for the condition.
Wow.
So what we do have is an estimate of 2 to 6% of the population, which actually makes BPD like very prevalent. That's a very high number.
The epidemiological rates of BPD in males and females are roughly equal. However, females are overdiagnosed and males are underdiagnosed significantly. This happens in part because women are overrepresented in most studies and treatment. Stereotypes about masculinity and femininity are also likely at play. It's no surprise that females, who have long been stereotyped for being emotional or hysterical, are the ones who are overdiagnosed here. This is a big point of criticism around BPD. The criteria of the diagnosis may reflect social expectations surrounding femininity and women's behavior that reinforces stigma and outmoded gender norms. The ways that we expect women to exist lend themselves to more emotional and more vulnerable places.
Another critique of BPD is that it pathologizes women's emotional experiences at the expense of understanding the social, relational, and systemic context. Essentially, is this a response to something bigger, which is where I come in saying this is a response to patriarchy. And that's why men suffer from it too. That's why. Is because patriarchy and capitalism and the structure of society is dependent on everyone to play a role without any consideration to how emotionally taxing that role is. Right? Because certain men are going to take to patriarchy great. They're naturally tall and big and strapping and logical and rational and success motivated, and they're natural providers, and they enjoy providing for their partners, and they enjoy being part of the child rearing experience, and they take to that shit great.
However,
And then some don't. Some are told your job is to keep everyone safe, and they're terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And they're terrified.
That is such a huge expectation to put on a person.
It's enormous. It's enormous. And same thing, like some women may take great to patriarchy. They may be like, I love to be a homemaker. I love to be like the emotional labor person in the family unit. I like being the person that mediates conflict and, you know, supports everyone's ego and all of that stuff. And then some women are incredibly stressed and strained. They're suffering because it's so antithetical to like who they are and what they want for themselves, like at all.
And the point of feminism is that the roles that thrive under patriarchy, so those people who are gonna like really fit that mold the best, that's fine. Like that is a perfect way for them to live and experience life and engage with each other. That is totally great for them. It's that under patriarchy, that is the only acceptable approach. And if you are not fitting those molds, then you're basically socially punished for it from multiple directions. So like be whoever you want to be. It's just under patriarchy, as long as what you want to be is exactly those particular gender roles.
Yeah.
And when we stray from those things, it's stressful.
BPD is mostly diagnosed in women, but men suffer from it equally. And that's telling us this impacts people's mental health. Like living this way is not good. Like there are a lot of people that are really suffering. And that is the bigger part of this episode, even though I've had incredibly negative experiences with 2 women in my life that had BPD that split on me and really tried to destroy my life. 2 different times, different circumstances, but it was devastating. And I'm still here going like, we have to like understand what this is a response to.
That's empathy. The causes of BPD. Experts are unsure exactly what causes BPD in females or the increased rate of it. Older research from 2003 suggests that 75% of those with the disorder are female. I would like to say, I just want to point out that I am using females as a noun because we're discussing this in a scientific context.
Yes.
In no other scenario would I refer to human women as females.
So generally, BPD is more likely to develop in people who are emotionally sensitive and reactive, meaning that feelings arise more immediately and intensely. And more important than that, once they're triggered, it takes them much longer to like come down from that emotional state. Here's another clip of someone with BPD talking about that experience.
I think something that makes people with borderline come across as manipulative is when we are triggered, sometimes the only thing that we can think about or process is how we're feeling. So sometimes, especially during conflict, we feel this inclination to express how bad we feel or how we feel in general. It's like our emotions become so overwhelming that we don't know what to do with them in that moment except for express them. And this, a lot of the time, comes across as us trying to be manipulative or trying to play the victim. I think a lot of the time, if it seems like someone with borderline is trying to play the victim, they're most likely extremely emotionally dysregulated and don't know how to process it, and they're probably trying to ask for help.
If someone emotionally vulnerable experiences an environment that does not acknowledge them and help them feel validated, they can develop BPD. It can develop in those who have experienced childhood abuse, neglect, or had their emotions minimized or discounted, or have other family members with BPD.
Yeah. So BPD mostly runs in families. My brother has it. My mom had it. With studies showing that it's like there's a 50% heritability. As a result, people with relatives with BPD are more likely to develop it themselves. Because of this, experts believe that there is like a genetic factor, but it could be just an overlap with environment as families share a home and experiences. Because early relationships and upbringing impact how people view themselves in the world, it's difficult to unravel genetics versus environment with BPD. And I would note here, there does seem to be like a strong correlation an attraction between people that have BPD and people that have NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, that they seem to kind of get along like a house on fire, and which kind of leads to one of the theories that's not forwarded by psychiatrists, but that's been forwarded by people that suffer from the illness, is that narcissism and BPD are actually both just trauma responses to abuse. And one, narcissism, says love bomb people so they like you, as a way of hiding the antisocial personality you've developed to protect yourself from abuse. Whereas BPD hate bombs people and teaches them to protect themselves from abuse by cutting people off and pushing them away and all of that kind of stuff. So there is an argument, and there's a lot of discussion going on between people that actually suffer from BPD and stuff like that, saying, I don't know that this is a disorder. I think this is like a trauma response, and that it's being viewed in specific ways because of gender dynamics, that men generally tend to NPD and women generally tend to BPD, but their argument is that both are actually trauma responses that are just manifesting in different ways. So one is internal and hate bombs, and one is external and love bombs. So just something to kind of think about in general.
That is a really interesting duality. And I didn't realize that NPD and BPD people, or people that experience NPD and BPD, were more typically drawn to each other. I didn't realize that was a trend.
They are, because stable, securely attached people, which make up a majority of the population, about 50%. If they encounter someone with BPD or NPD, they have enough resources and self-esteem to walk away. They go, oh, this is over the line, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas people with NPD or BPD are compromised in like a fundamental way.
Okay.
So when a person with BPD encounters a narcissist, they're incredibly susceptible to the love bombing because fear of abandonment, and incredibly susceptible to narcissistic abuse, which is the withdrawal of affection. And narcissists don't have any sense of identity. They don't exist if no one's looking at them. So they have a constant need to surround themselves with like sources of supply, which I would call sources of validation, which I would call an existential problem. Do I exist if I'm not seen? And because a BPD person is such a people pleaser and is so tuned in, a narcissist really loves that kind of just really individualized, obsessive attention. So they tend to get along like a house on fire and damage each other because they burn to the ground. A house on fire like burns to the ground. Like, it's not a sustainable dynamic, right?
Right. So they both kind of have an external locus of control that the other one is the perfect fit for.
Yes. And that is the crux of the issue with NPD or BPD, is that there's a natural or a learned helplessness because the locus of control around how you feel about yourself is completely dependent on other people. So you have to control those other people. So people with NPD have learned to control people through love bombing, through like withdrawal, through smear campaigns, triangulation, all of these sort of antisocial qualities. And people with BPD have learned to control other people through emotional displays, through splitting, through obsession, through violence, through manipulation. These are all internal feminine qualities, right? Manipulation, little spider. Manipulation. Manipulation's a very female trait. Codependency, like I'll be everything for you, very female trait. Narcissism is a very masculine trait. I'm going to charm and seduce you. I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to smear you. It's like it's got a dick. Narcissism has a dick. It's going to
manipulation
fuck you.
is just called being strategic when you have a dick.
Yeah. Like narcissism has a dick. It fucks you. And BPD has a cunt. It's warm. It's inviting. And it might bite your dick off.
Psychoanalysis from some hoes.
Yeah. Let me break it down for you.
Various traumatic life events can increase the risk of someone developing BPD. These may include physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, domestic violence, bullying, neglect, family separation, or divorce and abandonment. Researchers have identified a significant link between sexual abuse in childhood and the later development of BPD. It appears that sexual abuse is more likely to lead to BPD than other types of trauma. As females are more likely to endure sexual abuse, this could explain why BPD appears to be more common in females.
Another research group attempted to identify risk factors for the development of BPD in a community sample of adolescents and found that maternal child discord, maternal BPD, paternal substance use disorder, as well as depression and suicidality in the adolescent predict later development of BPD symptoms. These risks may moderate the improvement of patients during this phase of development. And so we have another clip.
When I tell people I have borderline personality disorder, they just think I have multiple personalities. They see me as someone that's abusive or dangerous. But what BPD really is unhealed trauma and trauma responses. Having BPD is having a constant fear that people are going to abandon you. It's having very intense emotions. It's regularly questioning who the fuck you are. It's having troubles maintaining relationships, feeling empty and numb all the time. It's feeling angry and irritable, but not knowing how to stop those feelings. It's having severe dissociation and paranoia. It's having daily impulses and self-destructive behavior. If you saw what we had to endure every single day, maybe you'd realize how hard this felt.
It really is. It breaks my heart that there are women out there that are just like suffering and they're being made the butt of jokes, you know, and it breaks my heart. One of the myths about BPD is that it's like untreatable and it's not true. It's not true.
So some of the treatments are different kinds of talk therapy modalities. So dialectical behavioral therapy is probably the most utilized treatment for BPD. It's primarily, I believe, therapy that was created to help people with BPD. Then cognitive behavioral therapy, which is, I think most people know what CBT is, psychodynamic therapy, and schema-focused therapy. So dialectical behavioral therapy is sort of a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and just sort of behavioral techniques with a focus on acceptance and mindfulness, accepting and acknowledging the things that you're feeling, and to help develop emotional regulation skills through that journey, through that lens. Cognitive behavioral therapy, it's the approach that we basically try to change our thoughts and behavior patterns that contribute to our emotional distress. So identifying the things that lead us down the path of feeling emotionally distressed and changing those behaviors. Psychodynamic therapy, it's more kind of psychoanalytical. It focuses on unconscious feelings, unconscious experiences, unresolved conflicts, unconscious processes that you're experiencing. So things that are going on in the background.
So like self-awareness. Teaching people self-awareness, essentially.
Exactly. Okay. It comes down to just identifying those things in yourself and countering them. I think the first step is when you find yourself in an experience in a very torrential place, allowing yourself the mindfulness to take a step back and examine, like, how did I get here and what brought me here? Because that awareness can help you not walk down that path next time or do it differently. And then schema-focused therapy. So a schema it's an emotional and behavioral process that we learn when we're very young. And so schema-focused therapy is about targeting maladaptive schemas. So the responses to feelings that you learn when you're a child, if a lot of those are very charged, like, for example, mom's really upset, so I'm going to do literally anything at the expense of my own wellness and pain to moderate that, because that is the behavior that I've learned to respond to the emotion of mom's upset.
Yeah.
Because that's the way that I have learned to resolve it. So like addressing those schemas, and they're all about developing healthier coping strategies and more mindfulness and self-awareness. They just kind of have slightly different approaches.
So in this case, you can kind of think your way out of it. So it seems like the basic treatment for BPD is helping people learn skills to disconnect from the emotional experience they're having and like step back and be able to kind of analyze it and create distance between what you're feeling and who you are.
Right. And that is a very, very challenging, difficult thing to do. I think that the better thing to be pushing for in each moment, if you allow yourself any room to be more, to be reflective of the situation, every time you do that going forward, you change the schema that you have crafted to handle these emotional responses. So you slowly start to change the way you respond to them just by being aware of them. And it's something that can be gradual, but gradual progress is still progress.
Well, and I think there's a lot of shame too, because with my current partner, he is a very securely attached person. His ability to just be calm and rational, emotionally available, but not overwhelming. And I had a really bad mental health day yesterday, and I was having it today, and he came home and I was getting ready to come over and do the podcast. I just turned to him and I was like, I had a really hard mental health day. And then I just kind of ran through like everything that I had been feeling, like all the catastrophizing thoughts, like everything else. And he was able to just like hold me and just talk me through it and just be like, everything you're feeling is valid. Those are all valid, normal feelings to have at this junction in your career, and with the strikes and the instability of those things. Like these are all normal feelings to have, and that's okay. And it's okay to have feelings. But let's just take a minute and look at what you've accomplished and all the things that you have and all the things that you can be grateful for right now and all the things that are going amazing and how things are different for other people. Let's recalibrate where you're at so that, no, like you're not a loser. Comparatively speaking, you're doing just fine. And these are all normal feelings to have. And like having a partner that's able to just help me step back from a very emotional place, but also having a partner that makes me feel comfortable enough that even though I know I'm having irrational feelings, that I can just vocalize them. I think being able to have someone talk you through how to regulate yourself is awesome.
Having somebody who makes you feel safe enough to make yourself vulnerable and disclose those feelings, because being honest about what you're feeling in the moment, you're not always proud of all the things you're feeling, but they're still there. And if you can't vocalize it and acknowledge it, then it's, you know, it's just going to fester. So I this is an aside, this is going to cut, but I was telling my mom about how happy I am that you've got this really great partner in your life, and she is so thrilled too. My mom is just over the moon for you.
I'm thrilled.
We're all big fans. We're all big fans here.
Like how I went from like a crazy like polyamorous slutty porn star person to being in a monogamous relationship with a cishet white dude that's emotionally available, and now I'm a TV writer. Like Tinder.
He figured out how to turn a hoe
Tinder
into a housewife.
Yeah, Tinder for the life you never knew you wanted.
God.
So one of the big things around the stigma around BPD is this idea that it's like incurable. And so part of what we want to do here is it is treatable. Mm-hmm. You are not stuck. The course of BPD in adults has been a focus of research during the past 2 decades, with several longitudinal studies providing insights into its course. The 2 most important are MSAD and CLPS. Both studies found that most patients with BPD improve with time. One study followed patients after 27 years and found that 92% of them no longer met criteria for BPD. Taken together, these results suggest that patients with BPD are able to achieve remission of symptoms, and that the longer the remission lasts, the lower the risk of relapse. And I think that's very important for anyone that's struggling with BPD to understand, is the studies show that things get better. And they also show, especially after people turn 40, which is actually the same thing for narcissism and sociopathology, is that people tend to age out of them by their 40s or mid 40s, even if they don't do like any work. So there's something about life experience, I guess, that kind of wallops people enough. But so, you know,
just stick with it.
Yeah. You can get better.
Yes. When the course of individual symptoms of BPD are examined, studies have generally demonstrated an overall decrease in all symptoms, but with symptoms relating to impulsivity and behavioral manifestations of BPD remitting at a quicker rate than internal, primarily affective experiences. Let's unpack what that means.
Yes.
The studies show that there's a decrease in symptoms. However, with symptoms that are related to being impulsive or like the behavioral manifestations of the disorder, they are remitted at a quicker state. So those go away a little bit faster than the internal and mood sort of symptoms and experiences. So the behavior changes faster than the mood. The external manifestation changes faster than the internal manifestation.
Right.
But it does improve. In general, behavioral symptoms of personality disorders are less stable than the personality traits associated with BPD over time. Despite early reductions in symptoms of self-harm and suicidality, the risk of completed suicide remains. After 27 years of follow-up, about 10% of patients completed suicide, typically when the patients were in their 30s and after multiple failed treatments.
Which is the other reason I wanted to do this episode, because I need people to understand that this is very real and has very real consequences.
Mm-hmm.
It is not just a hysterical person. It is not just an attention-seeking person. It is not a manipulative person. This is a person that has a not terminal illness, but has an illness that can have terminal outcomes. And
Yes.
we need to take that seriously, and we need to respect that, and we need to intervene and help these people instead of stigmatizing them. No matter how annoying we might find their behavior. Like we need to develop an understanding and an empathy around this stuff and meaningful ways of intervening on it, because a lot of people with BPD's life expectancy is about 20 years shorter than other people's. And it's not just from completing suicide. It also comes from addiction. There's a lot of binging behavior. So heart disease, obesity related comorbidities. The overall impact of that level of stress also relates to correlations in things like IBS, osteoporosis.
It's a holistic
Yeah,
diagnosis.
it's a holistic thing. It's like, and I would say, as not a doctor, that the condition of living under that much stress over time stresses all of the systems in the body. And the reality is that people with BPD die younger, significantly younger. A 20-year difference in mortality is a huge difference. That's a very significant difference. The average life expectancy of an American person right now is about 72 years old. Mm-hmm. So we're saying 52. That's a significant amount.
That's more than 25%. This is a disorder that ostensibly has a body count, and we need to treat it as something that serious when we engage with it and when we discuss it.
BPD is known to be highly stigmatized in mental health settings, particularly in youth mental health. And part of the reason for the stigma is that BPD is seen as a lifelong disorder that is untreatable. Much of the stigma occurs when clinicians encounter these patients in crisis settings, such as the emergency department, crisis clinics, and general psychiatric inpatient wards. As these are not the settings in which treatment occurs, clinicians develop a biased perspective on these patients. Few clinicians will have the opportunity to see these patients improve over time in specialized treatment clinics. Nonetheless, these patients improve and are treatable.
A clinician only sees people who have BPD on their worst day, and that's the only time they see anybody with BPD. The conclusion that they draw about BPD and about the people who experience it is going to be tainted by that. And one might argue that that is their professional responsibility to handle, but humans are humans, and at the end of the day, this is one source of stigma behind it. Yeah. Patients with BPD were also quite likely to rapidly lose their recovery. Several factors were identified as predictors to recovery, including not being hospitalized prior to the initial hospitalization, higher IQ, prior good vocational functioning, absence of cluster C comorbidity, which...
Cluster C is like bipolar and like...
Okay, cool. Thank you I was going to have to look it up. And the trait measures of high extroversion and high agreeableness. So if they're very extroverted and very agreeable on the personality scale, that tends to bode better. Recovery was also associated with both marriage and being a parent, although often at an older age than non-recovered patients. So essentially like getting married and having a kid when it is something that your life is ready to accommodate tends to have a positive association versus the same circumstances that are perhaps coming at it.
Yeah, and also
or from impulsivity.
The primary feature of borderline personality disorder is fear of abandonment. Mm-hmm. So these are people that in childhood or early adulthood did not feel supported, did not feel seen, did not feel validated, that felt that love was incredibly conditional, that safety was incredibly conditional. And the conditions were change yourself. The conditions were recognize as quickly as possible discomfort. Recognize as quickly as possible when someone's mad at you. Recognize as quickly as possible because these are existential threats, right? If someone gets married or has a kid, like those are like permanent relationships. Mm-hmm. And so they can go a great deal in healing people with BPD because the biggest structure, the biggest agitator in the illness is this fear of abandonment. Again, I go back to patriarchy because I think that this fear of abandonment is men that are afraid they'll be abandoned by women if they admit that they have fear. With women, it's fear of abandonment if they admit that they have needs. That fear of abandonment is what causes all the other behavior because there's like arrested development going on. They're stuck where they were as a 6-year-old. And I used to describe that to my psychiatrist. I would say, I feel so weird because I'm an adult and I'm a grown person. But most of the time, I feel like the 5-year-old me is the one that is operating the skin suit. That set me up to conduct myself a certain way in interpersonal relationships. I never got crazy in my relationships because I knew how that looked and how it felt. So I was like able to never do that to other people because I know what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that. And I knew that ultimately, if I wanted someone to be close to me, having really radical hardcore emotional responses was the quickest way to get them to leave because I wanted to leave when my mom did it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so it kind of helped me not be BPD to have a BPD parent because I was just like, no, that is not the way to keep somebody because I graduated at 16. The first thing I tried to do was get the fuck out of that house. I love my mom now. Me and my mom have a great relationship.
She's lovely. I love your mom too.
She's so great. Miss Jackie is the best.
Yes.
She really is. And she would be the first person to be like, yeah, like, fuck yeah, I was like a shitty parent because I was coming off of heroin and came from abuse and everything else. So like I was learning at the same time as everyone else. So she's also very willing to admit the reality of what happened. And that went a long way in healing my mental health. Was that she got to a place where she could acknowledge that she fucked up. And then that was so healing because it was like, okay, like I'm not crazy, right?
Yeah, it's real.
Like,
it's making it clear that it's real and she's making it real too.
Yes.
What you're saying about how you learned through the trauma you experienced, how it kind of informed you how not to be, that really, that hit my heart because I have learned how to be a better partner over time by being with some people who have been real fuckos and learning exactly how I never want to make another person feel.
Yes.
And working hard to have that be the center of like, never shall I ever make someone I purport to love feel the way that people who have loved me have made me feel in certain instances. And that's like learning from that. I think when you're in a situation like that, your response is either let me figure out how to never do that myself, or shit, I guess this is how we do things. I guess this is how we demonstrate love is by making people feel like this. I guess this is what love is supposed to feel like. So this is how you love someone, this is how you make them feel. This is how you treat them. And
Well, a thing I've been thinking about in the past few days when I texted you and Josh and said I want to do an episode on BPD. I've had many mothers in my life. I've had many mothers and mentors. I grew up very poor. I grew up in an incredibly economically impacted environment with a lot of violence and crime and sexual abuse and physical abuse, domestic violence, emotional abuse, you name it. What I was thinking about was that all of the mothers that I had, the mentors, the mothers, the teachers, the aunties, I had a lot of moms, right?
Yeah.
And all of them taught me how to survive, but not one of them taught me how to thrive. And because thriving was not the goal, that was too ostentatious of a goal. Thriving is a very lofty goal when you come from where I came from. The main goal was survival. And so I know how to survive. I've survived on my own since I was 16 years old. I've gotten here, and I'm very thankful to all of those mothers for teaching me those skills. I wish that some of them had been able to teach me how to thrive, to seek happiness, to understand how to make happiness happen. That has been a much more fraught journey. And
I think you're seeking that from people who might not know themselves.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like when I say BPD and it's like part of the patriarchy, is that I think that most women are not pursuing thriving, they're pursuing surviving. And that's a structural societal thing. Like that is not about mental health.
I think you wrote this and it stuck with me. This was years ago, that being a man is like walking around with $5 in your pocket, and being a woman is like walking around constantly 50 cents short.
My mom told me that when I was asking her about dating advice, because I had a crush on this guy and he was treating me some type of way, and we were driving in the car, and she just turned to me as I was going through like this long diatribe about how hurt and confused I felt. And then she said that. She was like, don't take it personal. She said, being a man is like always having $5 extra in your pocket, and being a woman is like always being 50 cents short, and they're never going to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But it's not personal. Like I would like to make that personal.
I'm taking it personal, so it is already. Several papers have been written about institutional sexism when it comes to the diagnosis and the categorization and treatment of BPD when it comes to women. In the article, Women at the Margins, A Critique of the Diagnosis of Borderline Personality Disorder by Claire Shaw and Jillian Proctor, they posit that BPD can be applied to women who fail to live up to their gender role because they express anger and aggression. Conversely, the diagnosis is also given to women who conform too strongly by internalizing anger and expressing this through self-focused behavior, such as self-injury.
In Power, Selfhood, and Identity, A Feminist Critique of Borderline Personality Disorder by Bria Berger, further explains, the diagnosis of BPD presents a double bind. Women with BPD who engage in behaviors that are not stereotypically feminine, self-injury, multiple sex partners, external expressions of anger, are cast in the archetype of the over-emotional, hysterical woman. What do we think here?
I mean, I think women are pretty much fucked if we do and fucked if we don't.
Like I said, the original title of this episode was Women? Wrong?
Are the women wrong?
Women, are they wrong?
The answer might surprise you.
But I mean, like, so some people are going to be like, yeah, I feel sympathy, like, whatever. There are entire Reddit groups and Reddit threads dedicated to how crazy women with BPD are. And, like, let's not downplay the shit that happens. They will lie. People with BPD will often lie in the effort to display an emotional truth. That's the way I always put it. They will sue you. They will accuse you of sexual assault. They will stalk you. There is a lot of very antisocial behavior that is associated with BPD. And I don't want to gloss over that.
Let's maybe reshape that from they will do these things to they, in some cases, they might. Because those are not universal experiences or traits. I don't want to downplay and I don't want to overplay. But yes, these are all things that you could experience. And not everyone with BPD does all these things. So if you have BPD and you're like, wait a second, yes, you're right. But
I care deeply about women. And I think that BPD is about, it's like women get sexually assaulted and then they have BPD. Fucking cunts. That's how it feels. How about instead of letting men little kids and then telling those little kids that they don't grow up into the right kind of women?
oh,
It's like
shit.
it's so gaslighty. The number one fucking indicator of someone developing BPD is sexual abuse. So is BPD like a disorder, or is BPD what happens when you sexually abuse a child? And like, why are we making this their fucking fault? And I understand why we are, because when they act out as adults, that behavior can be really fucking scary and really annoying and overwhelming. And there's this part of me that goes like, yeah, but think about how it feels to be like a 6 or 7-year-old child and be fucking raped. And then not feel like you can talk to people about it because you're going to be viewed as a piece of chewed up chewing gum.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
then,
pathologizing victimization. It goes back to the daddy issues thing too. Like, what people insult women by saying she has daddy issues, which means as a child she was victimized by a man that she was supposed to trust.
Yeah. And it's like, so you're punishing the person that stayed instead of the person that left. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. I see where your values are. I have conflicting feelings about BPD because, like I said, I've been victimized by someone that had it. And it was terrifying and it was horrible and it nearly ruined my career.
She is not a person who has ever sought treatment.
No,
by the way.
She is not. She is not. And I am not the first and I am not the last person that was victimized by this person. And they left a trail of legal entanglements and exposés on the internet and everything else. Like, I am hardly the first person victimized by this person. And I wish her nothing but the worst. I have no positive feelings about her whatsoever. Like, I do not like her at all. I think she is a fucking horrible person. And like, that is hard for me to say.
Well, that can be true. And she can also be a person who experiences BPD.
Yes. So like, I guess what I'm saying is, on one hand, like, I understand the whatever. But when we understand that, for the most part, this illness is born out of sexual abuse. Mm-hmm. You just have to view it differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about with borderline personality disorder. I wanted us to just talk about it and dispel some myths, which is, yes, it absolutely can be treated. Mm-hmm. It is not a lifelong diagnosis. If you have been recently diagnosed with BPD and you are feeling horrible, you can get better. The statistics, I didn't go into all the stats on this, but in the studies I read, which are linked in the show notes, there's like a 90% recovery rate if you commit yourself to the therapeutic process. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't have to live this way. It does not have to be a death sentence. And I want women to know that. And I want all of us to look at depictions of crazy women and view them in different ways. A lot of women have been victimized and
they never stop being punished for it.
They never stop. And yeah, like, that crazy behavior comes from like men molesting little girls. Like, why is she so crazy? Because you guys.
What did you do? I don't know.
Yeah.
What did you do to make her crazy?
Because you guys. Mm-hmm. Because, like, as a woman, I'm so sick and tired of men talking about how women are crazy and all of this stuff while they are raping children, they are beating their women, they are going online and saying women's only function is to be mothers, that women age out over 25.
Which they're also the leading cause of death for pregnant women.
Yeah.
At the same time.
The leading cause of death for pregnant women is domestic violence. People say that sex work is the most dangerous job. That's because they don't take into account stay-at-home mothers. When you take into account stay-at-home mothers, that is 100% the most dangerous job. That is the number one percentage of people that die by domestic violence. Just FYI. Sex work is, when compared to stay-at-home mother, is not nearly as dangerous. Just take that and do what you want with it. Also, the quickest growing population in prisons is women arrested for sex work. And 80% of women that are currently incarcerated are mothers.
Wow.
Just something to think about. When we say that women have equal rights, it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
Like when we have a response to the system, like the systemic abuse that we are put through, it's pathologized. So that no one has to think about like changing their behavior or changing anything.
Well, because we are a great external locus of control for those people.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thank you for bringing this topic. This was really good. You knocked it out of the park, and yeah, I loved it.
Do we want to do our land acknowledgements? I love you too so much.
Yes. You go first.
Okay. I'm coming to you from the traditional Chumash and Tongva land in East LA. And it is important to acknowledge the original stewards of the land and acknowledge that Indigenous people continue to thrive and exist today and are an extant culture. And we just want to, I just want to thank those that have come before me for maintaining this land and that I get to be on this space and all of the things and search the landfills. Missing and murdered Indigenous women are important.
And I am in Austin, Texas, on the historical land of the Tonkawa, the Comanche, and the Lipan Apache. And it's important to acknowledge the people who came before us on this land and who still are here and still are protecting it to this day.
Absolutely.
So we have been ill repute.
Yes, we have been ill repute. Housekeeping. Mm-hmm. You can follow us on TikTok, Ill Repute Pod, Ella Darling X, and Call Me Savi. On Instagram, we are Ill Repute, Sovereign_Syre, and Ella Darling 69. On Twitter, at Sovereign Syre, at Ella Darling, at Ill Repute Pods. You can also buy merch at importantadult.com. Ella, what do you want?
You should subscribe to our YouTube channel because we are very attractive people and you can see the video of us talking very animatedly to each other. And we're babes, so like, go for it. That's all I've got, I think. If you are still listening, we will have Hetty Part 4 for you next week. I just had a little bit of a rough week and I haven't finished the script yet. But we'll get there, promise.
Don't apologize. They'll get it when you're ready.
You're goddamn right.
Women and women first, bitch. What do you think that means? It means when you're ready. Josh texted me, he's like, when are we going to do it, Hetty Part 4? I was like, when it's done.
When it's done.
And he went, oh, okay. And I was like, in the between time, we're doing this. And however long it takes her to do it, we got shit to do. We got stuff.
I love you. We're good.
We're good. I love you so much.
I love you. I love it. And also you look really, really beautiful. I've been just like, kind of like really just fawning all over you this whole time, but it has never been an appropriate point to be like, hey, by the way, in the middle of this very heavy topic, I just want to point out you look stunning today.
Well, hey, they say by the time you're 40, you have the face that you deserve, which is why I plan on getting a lot of surgery.
Your face is perfect and I love it. All right, baby
I love
girl.
you. Okay. All right.
you.
Let's stop recording.